All right, so we're here talking with Jennifer Baker on Live Life Well. We do this on a regular basis, and this time we're talking about what is an intentional father.
Okay, so an intentional father, intentional mother, intentional grandparent, or anyone like that. Anybody who's intentional in a relationship first needs to think about, what is it that is important to me? Like, we sometimes give fathers an exercise and say, okay, here are 24 values. I want you to rank those, so you've got the 5 top values. I want you to think about your 5 least important, and then the rest can be in between. So then we start ranking things like, I want my child to be responsible, or I want my child to be honest. I want my child to know how to manage money. I want my child to be kind. And then we talk about, what are you doing that will help this happen in your child? Like, you want your child to be kind, so what are you doing to help your child be kind?
So what would be an example of that? You're there.
Yes.
That's part of the component.
Right, you have to show up. So I would just say, obviously, you know, you need to be
that's a key.
The key thing is, you need to be aware, you need to be present, you need to be actually interacting, what we call hands-free parenting, like put the phone down.
Okay.
Hands-free, like, now you're gonna, so you're not in your phone, and you're being intentional about, I want my child to be kind. How are you going to demonstrate that? How are you going to model kindness? So if you got to know your values, and a lot of people will say, like, I want my kid to be a good kid. Well, let's talk about 5 important characteristics. Like, do you want your child to be a leader? What would you do that would give your child an opportunity to be a leader? I want my child to think for himself. I want my child to be curious. What are you going to do that encourage those characteristics? So I think you've got to kind of start with that, and then you need to show up. You need to be present. You need to put the phone down, and then you need to realize that your child is always looking at you, so it's what you do, how you interact with your child, that's probably going to encourage or support or promote those intentional values.
So many times when we have these discussions, you give me examples, and that really helps me, and I think the people watching understand. So when we're talking about this, I understand the concept. Do you have an example, like, I went to the store and something like that?
All right, so I mean, let's just talk about the other thing I want to say very quickly is that a reason parents are not intentional sometimes is because they allow someone else to write the script for their life. They allow someone else to tell them what a good parent does. So let's say that one of your values was you wanted your child to have a good relationship with their cousins or their grandparents or older adults. And yet, you spent all your time at your child's activities where he or she was the center of those activities, for example, sports, and you actually made no time at all to visit a grandparent or an older family member. Now, that's not saying that being in sports is bad. What that's saying is, you need to think about, what are my reasons for having my child in sports? And do those fit with my values? They very well may fit with your values, but if they're so involved in this activity over here that they never have any chance, for instance, to do chores around the house, to help with the vacuuming, to help clean the bathroom, to pick up after themselves, to set the table, to put dishes in the dishwasher. If they don't have any time to do that because they're so busy with their own activities, then you need to ask yourself, does that actually fit with my values? And I think a lot of times parents don't spend time thinking, what is it I actually want out of our life together? This person here has their own unique personality and set of abilities, and they're only going to be in my home for maybe 18, 19 years. How are we going to spend that time we have together, and what are we going to do? So again, most parents want their kids to be responsible kids. So what kind of responsibilities are you give them? You can't just say be responsible. You might say, oh wow, we have a dog and the dog hasn't gotten fed. Wow, what do you think should happen when that doesn't happen? See what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Yep. Oh, look at that. The dishes are still on the table and you want to go to your practice or to your friend's house. I don't think that can happen until this happens. So
that's one component, and you mentioned being a role model.
yes.
Modeling behavior. So if you're a parent and you're having temper tantrums on a regular basis,
Right.
or talking bad about your neighbor, is that the best role model?
If you are having meltdowns of your own, you're very angry, you're shouting, you might say, is self-control a value I want to teach my child? Because my child is not learning self-control by what they're seeing in me. Otherwise, or they might say, well, I don't want to be like my dad because I didn't like it when he was like that. So remember that children are always watching, and sometimes children will be so honest, little children will say things or do things, and their parents will say, what have we talked about? And I'm thinking, I bet you haven't.
Yeah.
Maybe they've heard those words before.
So we've got be present,
Right.
Good role model,
Right.
Supportive.
Right, but also writing your own script.
Writing your own script.
Being very intentional, and ideally with your spouse, your partner, your child's other parent, let's talk about what we want for our children. What values do we want for our children? And really, your credit card statement is probably going to reflect what your values really are. Where you spend your time, both your calendar and where you spend your money, that says a whole lot about what I really find important in my life. So you might want to take some time thinking about that, because what does that say to your child about what's important?
Part of this might be embracing challenges. So when I heard you talking about, we're not going to practice until the dishes are off the table.
Right?
There might be a conflict and therefore a challenge in your life. So the child might say, but I'm gonna be late. Ah!
So first of all, I would suggest that you say it like, I'll be happy to drive you to practice just as soon as the table is cleared and the dishes are in the dishwasher. So say it in a happy voice. Oh, I'll be happy to drive you to practice just as soon as those dishes are in the dishwasher. And then of course a child may be very upset and you would be like, oh, this is so sad. But then you repeat in a very kind voice, I'll be happy to drive you to practice just as soon as, and they say, but I'll be late. And you'll say, probably so, but I'll be happy to drive you to practice just as soon as. Because when you're brave, then, and you're kind and you're firm, and they're not rattling your cage, you're less likely to see that very often. But when they know they can get a rise out of you, then you're going to see that more often.
I think everyone who has lived with children, been a parent,
Yes.
has said, if I could only be that perfect all the time. I'm sure there are parents out there listening to this and thinking, including myself, I have not been perfect. And you beat yourself up. Do you just get up and do it again and try again? How do you learn from your mistakes?
Well, I think two things. We interviewed Jason Henson for a podcast. Jason has 7 children. He's a very intentional father. He said, and yes, we intended to have 7 children.
Okay. More power to him.
Yeah. He says,
that takes a lot.
He says on the podcast, we're all the way weird.
All the way weird.
But he said, with 7 children, I don't always get it right. And he talked about the times he got angry and things he did stuff he was not proud of. And then he talked about apologizing. So when you as a parent don't get it right, apologizing to your children teaches them that they can also own their mistakes and they can apologize.
So you don't have to be the all-knowing kind of Wizard of Oz as a parent.
Right.
You can pull back the curtain, if I continue with that. You
Well,
can pull back the curtain and
yeah.
say, I am not the all-wonderful
Yeah.
Oz. I do make mistakes.
And realize that when you do that, you're actually teaching your child something very important. I mean, honestly, people I see in therapy whose parent never admitted that they made a mistake, never apologized to their child, never said they were sorry, never said I could have done a better job. Those are people who have a difficult time owning their own mistakes as well. So it's a very powerful thing, and I think it's kind of a loving thing when we say, you know, I lost my cool, I talked to you in a way I wish I hadn't have. If I could do that over, I would do it differently. I hope you'll forgive me.
Yeah.
So,
Some of these strategies, like the table, I'm picturing a child 8, 10 years old
Yep.
in there.
Yep.
The strategy's going to have to be different to be an intentional father when you have a 13, 14, 15, 16-year-old. Those present whole different challenges. But is the philosophy still the same?
yes. And Jason and I actually talked about this because with 7 children, his children range in age from 3 to, I think, 19. And they have 4 teenagers in the house right now. So he said, well, first of all, you have to be willing to be tired because often kids want to talk at 10, 10:30. You know, they come in at night, they want to talk about where they've been, what their friends are thinking about. That if they want to talk to you, even though you're tired, you need to make time to talk. So there's, again, that being present thing. We also talked about that, again, they're more emotional. So you need to tolerate a little bit more what people would call disrespect, realizing that they're not in the best control of their emotions, but you need to be in control of your emotions.
Right.
And when you're in control of your emotions, you're demonstrating them like, okay, you're upset, but I'm listening. Now, if they go on and they start being very disrespectful, you might say, I think we need to talk later when you can be calmer. Or I'll be happy to talk to you just as soon as your voice is as calm as mine.
That's a good line to remember.
Yeah.
Where were you 10 years ago when I needed that line?
Well, I knew that I was actually making progress. As you know, my children are grown and have children of their own.
Yeah.
But I can remember when my son and I were toe-to-toe in the kitchen and he was very angry about something. And he said to me, "You're so immature, you won't even argue with me." And I thought, oh, I'm finally getting it. But, you know, mind you, he was probably 16 at the time.
Yeah, yeah.
When I finally was like, I need to be in control of me, and then that's going to be much better in dealing with him. Otherwise, what they remember is how red your face is, how loud your voice is, and the choice words that you use. That's what they remember.
So you have a podcast
Right.
on this. Are there any books you recommend? I did some research and I saw a couple of books, and it's hard to know when you're looking at the
Yeah.
books is this a good one? Is this not such a good one? Do you have other resources out there you recommend?
Well, there are any number of resources out there. It's an old favorite, but I do love Parenting with Love and Logic or Parenting Children. You can go on the Love and Logic website, and there's a lot of good information there. There are downloads, there are videos, there are books, resources, and they do a great job of talking about young children, children in the elementary school years, and then working with adolescents. So I think that's a good place to start. There are many other good resources that, you know, are out there. Not all are created equal. I think we want to think about those. We want to think about those resources that realize that the parent's job is to be in charge, but I don't mean by controlling, but like our job is to be in control of ourselves and to set some limits in the house and standards in the household, and then hold kids accountable in a loving way, realizing They are going to mess up because they were children. I was a child, you were a child,
Yeah.
and you know we did our share of childish things.
Yeah.
Maybe not
sorry,
you, Paul.
Mom
I
and
don't know,
Dad.
but I know I did.
Oh no, I may have mentioned this before, but at one point we had the I can't think of the name.
Slingshot?
Slingshots, and we had a target, and somebody missed the target and put out a window. And every penny that somebody had went to pay for the window. I know it wasn't enough, but that was the lesson I took away from that. Was, oh, this is going to cost because now I don't have any money for the things I want to
Right.
spend money on as a kid, and the only money that was coming in was money for like birthdays and Christmas. So
Yeah.
that was a hard lesson.
I remember when
And the
our
slingshot
yeah.
went away.
I remember when our son was about 12 or 13 years old, he kicked a ball. It's like I was trying to kick it over the roof, and on accident, he kicked it into a very large window in a school. So he got grabbed by the shoulders and brought into my office, and there the responsible person stood with her hands on her hips and said, "Tell your mother what you did." And what my thought at the moment was, I better get this right because I have a witness to my behavior. But you know, I expressed like, "Oh, well, that's too bad." But what he did was spend a lot of weeks mowing lawns to pay off a very expensive window that at that time cost well over $200, and that was a lot of lawn mowing then. So
Yeah. Well, I hope the people watching are encouraged by this. We've talked about a lot of different things, including, which is really good to hear, that it's okay to apologize. I
Yes.
think that's a really big takeaway. That is part of being a role model. Being
It
able to admit
is.
your mistakes.
even when things don't go the way that we want them to, how we conduct ourselves, how we control ourselves is a very big example for our children.
All right. Thanks
Okay.
for joining us.
You're